Welcome to Compliance Clips, your transportation insight hub. I'm Rick Morgan. Please join me and my co-host, the effervescent John Farquhar, as we share our expertise and that of our guests to help you navigate the road towards improved safety, compliance, and profitability.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Compliance Clips with your host, co-host, maybe something like that, Rick
Christmas
Morgan
host.
and
That's
John
me.
Farquhar. Oh, Christmas host. Oh, like a Santa's elf.
That's right.
Maybe that could do it. It is that time. So anyway, today we've got a special guest. Bud Kneller with Frontline Commercial Vehicle Solutions. So Bud has an extensive background in the, let's call it the MTO world, and he has stepped over into the dark side and now runs a company. I believe he's a co-founder. So Bud, tell us more about your operation and who you are.
Yeah, so like you say, about 20 years with the Ministry of Transportation, hired in the late 90s, and then kind of ran the gamut of inspecting at a truck inspection station, for the most part in Putnam, became a provincial trainer for the ministry for new hires, then became a CVSA trainer, did some facility auditing, and then finished up my career in head office for road user safety, like boots on the ground, we call it, which is in St. Catharines. In 2016, myself and Alex Bouget, who was also with the ministry, started Frontline. So we're in our 9th year.
So today we're wanting to touch on some changes that have come down the pipe, I guess you could say, with regards to the CVOR, the Commercial Vehicle Operator Record and whatnot, and some of the steps that MTO is taking to let people know about some situations that they need to be more aware of than they probably have been.
Yeah, so interestingly, these changes, for the most part, stem from a Auditor General report from 2019,
Wow.
which is 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The problem, as you know, or as I will point out to you, is we had this little pandemic between then and now, which made it very difficult for the ministry to respond to the recommendations. And so what we're really seeing now is a catch up where, they've been implementing processes along the way, and now we're starting to kind of see the results.
Right.
So prior to the Auditor General report, generally speaking, interventions on the part of the ministry were driven by the overall violation rate of a carrier. So when they exceeded 35%, they would receive a warning letter. And that basically said, hey, we're not happy with how things are going. You shouldn't be either. This is your opportunity to make changes so that we don't have to enter into your world further than this letter.
Right.
At 50%, that would normally generate an audit, a facility audit. And as the overall violation rate, if it did continue to climb, then there could, also be interviews, show cause hearings, and sanctions right up the ladder. The point being, everything came back to the overall violation rate. One of the things the Auditor General found was there was a number of carriers that were in the CVR program that model wasn't working for. So take a company that's operating up north that rarely, if ever, gets inspected, and for that matter, rarely, if ever, barring a collision, has any interaction even with enforcement of any kind.
Right.
Now all of a sudden they have a fatality or they have a serious collision, and people are looking at it and going, this company's only got a 10% violation rate. They would have never come into the world of the Ministry of Transportation. So that was one of the things that come out of that. And so the response of the ministry was to, what I would say, add another layer of, when are we going to intervene with companies? Let's not just wait and rely strictly on the overall violation rate. So we, at Frontline, we use a term like a major event or a catastrophic event. I don't know that the ministry has a specific word for it, but basically there's a fatality. You're going to be much more likely to have some type of an intervention. You have a wheel off where somebody is injured or, God forbid, deceased. If you are impounded, that could generate intervention. If you have a collision that causes a major disruption to the motoring public, so you hit a bridge on the 402, the 403, the 401, you hit a bridge in a major city where now a big portion of that city is being disrupted. If you have a driver that's involved in a collision and comes out of it with an impaired charge, a collision where the driver is found to be fatigued, comes out of it with an hours of service over hours charge. And any category, so you've got your collisions, your convictions, and your inspections. If any of those three categories exceeds 50% of the set rate, that could also trigger an intervention. To be clear, I'm not saying that those are cut and dry. What I mean by that is at 35%, you're getting a warning letter. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm not saying that if one of your categories bounces over 50, you're going to get an intervention. What I'm saying is it going to trigger somebody to look at it. And then that somebody will either decide we're going to escalate this up the food chain to have a closer look at it and decide, do we want to have some type of intervention or not? So that's one thing that is pretty significant that we're seeing. Now, once the intervention has been triggered, we're now seeing some differences there as well. So I'll give you an example. It used to be you'd either get a warning letter or you would get the next step would be an interview. There was really nothing in between. Now there's something called a significant event warning letter. And we've worked with a few clients where this significant event warning letter has had some requests or conditions attached to it. I'll give you an example. We worked with a company that was involved in a fatality. They received a significant event warning letter and were requested to provide the ministry with the following. What are your processes at the time of such an incident to go out and see and collect as much evidence and as much information as you can? What documentation can you provide us that detailed that investigation, what the findings of that investigation were, what was the root cause of that fatality, and what were any contributing factors? What corrective action have you or are you planning to take for the individual that was involved in it, and potentially down the road if there was other incidents that made you feel concerned that that could be leading towards something like that again? And then lastly, what changes are you planning for the company as a whole with respect to your policies, your procedures, your orientation, onboarding, and then how are you going to monitor that to determine whether it's working or not? Like pretty robust.
Yes.
That's a lot of work. And, you know, to be honest, probably a lot of major trucking companies have a lot of these processes in place where, you know, what we find, and I'm sure you guys are the same, it's the people that are not trucking companies, right? They are companies who need a truck to do their work. And as a result of that, they don't have a lot of these types of things in place. So I think that's a big part of the education is for all companies that, you know, construction companies, you know, anybody that's out there that needs to use large vehicles, that's the big challenge. Because unfortunately, you know, it doesn't look very good when you come back and go, we're going to do this, we're going to start that, we're going to, as opposed to this is what we had in place. Clearly, it didn't give us the result we hoped for, but now we're going to look at ways of adding to that.
Exactly.
Another thing they did was they updated the conviction codes for automated speed enforcement and red light cameras. So again, that was part of the request or the suggestion. I believe it was in November, end of 2022, that these actually got updated. So prior to that, your drivers could be getting red light camera tickets. No points. They could be getting automated enforcement, speed enforcement tickets, no points. Now all of a sudden, points. And that's having a huge impact. on a lot of companies. And a lot of companies, now you're starting to get involved with bus companies, for example.
Yeah.
Stuff that, wouldn't normally be what we would expect in our world that's now coming into that world.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's a perfect opportunity to hold the commercial operators, hold their feet to the fire, because they're supposed to be the safe operators of the public highways, and if they're not doing it, then it becomes a big problem. So just to kind of cap here a little bit, so what we're seeing is the focus is not so much on the overall violation rate to trigger intervention, but individual events that could be deemed as catastrophic or high risk or something along that line.
Yeah, I mean, the overall violation rate is still a part of it. And in areas of the province where it works, they'll still use that tool as part of their decision-making process. But where it's not, then they're looking to these other, like you said, major events to potentially generate an intervention of some kind.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was talking with a client here a few weeks ago, and they had an incident on a major bridge, border crossing, as a matter of fact, and it made national news. And all of a sudden, they got a letter from the MTO, and they had called me up and said, like, what does this mean? And we'll just read it. Let's read it. And I was in their office, and we're looking at it, and I'm going, oh, okay, yeah, I seen the video of your truck on fire on the bridge. There was no crash, but there was a fire, and it shut down the bridge for a certain amount of time. And so I said, well, this is pretty much asking for just what you had mentioned, Bud. What are you doing about it? What did your investigation findings come to? How are you going to correct this from happening again? And what's the issue? And what was very interesting was they're a fairly large organization, and they've got some skill sets to do something. However, they've done nothing. They were of the mindset that, well, the truck caught fire. Big deal. It's within our deductible. We're just going to pay for it. The truck's a write-off. It's an older truck. We're going to get rid of it, and we don't care. It's no big deal. And I'm going, but the problem is you made national news. People do care, and you need to do something. So once we sat down and realized that you haven't even reported this to your insurance company, and they're like, well, why would we? It's below our deductible. And I'm going, it made the national news. You caught the attention of the MTO. You need to let your insurance provider know, because I said there could be damage to the bridge. If you had a fire, maybe it burnt the bridge. I said, now we could have structural integrity. I said, there's going to be a claim come back to you guys. Oh, no. I said, you better let your insurance company know. But I said, have you thought of getting an adjuster involved to find out why the fire happened? And they had no clue. And so these were the steps. I said, this is what the MTO wants to know from you. What have you done? What have you determined the cause of this incident? And how are you correcting it going forward? I said, you might find it could be a simple maintenance item that now I can educate my maintenance team to go check every truck to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's what they want to hear. And so I've dealt with a few interventions with some other ones. Landscaping companies are a good one. Plumbers. All plumbers, all they want to know is, what is it you're doing to address the issue? And I don't find it's rocket science. They're asking very simple questions that I think most companies should be asking of themselves.
I think the issue for a lot of these companies is, as Bud identified, they're not trucking companies, so they don't have a department, or even in some cases a person responsible for oversight of compliance and the safety elements. And it sounds like this is something that's been identified for the MTO to be more interested in.
Yeah. And the other thing that come out of it was that they felt that a lot of municipalities were not being dealt with the same as a CVR holder. To your point, a landscaper, a construction company, and why is that? And so I've got a slide when I do the presentation that's a direct right from the report. It's pretty eye-opening, the amount of municipalities with extremely high rates of major events or other incidents like we're talking about, even violation rates that have had no intervention, that's
Right.
dramatically going to be changing.
Right.
Hey, thank you very much for watching part 1 of our interview with Bud Kneller from Frontline Consulting. Part 2 coming up next week is got some really, really valuable information. We've got new levels of audits coming out from the ministry. We've got new approaches after an audit. There's changes to what happens with your scoring after an audit. We're not just doing a simple in and out. There's things that you want to hear about action plans. There's new audit types. And we're going to talk about some of the events and initiatives that are being taken to address the Highway 11 and 17 situation that has been in the forefront of the news lately with some of the unacceptable behaviors up there by a small minority of the carriers. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. And if you've got questions from today's material, or maybe you're just looking to improve your safety and compliance game, please feel free to reach out to either me or John. And remember, you can't manage what you don't monitor. The key to compliant profitability is just one phone call away. So until next time, put the phone down while you drive and keep your eyes on the prize.